Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
Guys, in my formerly fingerprinted fingertips, I'm holding up right now what could be or what could have been the potential start of World War III. We're going to play some video for you that is probably, if the reports are true, Biden is responsible for blowing up Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline and potentially getting us into World War III. He's intentionally escalated, or he's responsible, if the reporting is true, he's responsible for escalating the Russia-Ukraine war. He's the one that shut down the Keystone XL pipeline, yet he waived Trump's sanctions for Putin to reopen a Nord Stream 2 pipeline so that they could transfer Russian gas to Germany. This is damning. I'm telling you right now, I went from loving Zelensky to hating Zelensky to realizing that Zelensky is just a pawn for Biden and for NATO. All right, guys, welcome to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. I hope you heard what I opened up with. Guys, please subscribe to my podcast. Go to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/The Carl Jackson Show. The Carl Jackson Show on YouTube. You can find me on Rumble as well. We really want to build up our subscription on YouTube. You can find us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, wherever I am on social media, True Social, Getter, Facebook. You can find me. You can find me there, The Carl Jackson Show. Guys, I had a totally different show planned for you today. As a matter of fact, I didn't even bring in the rest of the research that I had for you. I wanted to prove to you, I intended to prove to you, and I will do this perhaps tomorrow or on Monday, that Biden, despite his idiosyncrasies, despite his dementia, he could win in 2024 if he chose to run. And I think I've got evidence to prove just that. The Republicans, the conservative movement, constitutionalists should not take Biden lightly despite his horrible performance the other night. But I had columns prepared that I was going to go through, and some notes that I had taken to go through to prove to you basically that Biden could win the White House, including this group CTCL, that is a Zuckerbucks wannabe. Actually, it's not a Zuckerbucks wannabe. It's a group that Mark Zuckerberg gave money to during the 2020 campaign cycle that helped put Biden over the top. Anyway, a lot of money is being funneled to them again in order to get out the vote. Listen, so a lot of stuff that I'm going to talk to you about. Fauci is in the news again, and I'm not talking about his speaking fee, but he's basically admitted that he knew that the jabs were pretty much crappy all along from the very onset. All of this stuff I was going to bring to you today, but and then this story broke. Yesterday, Seymour Hersh at Substack.com wrote about how America took out the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Guys, I'm going to do something that I never do. I'm going to go through this column verbatim. I'm going to comment on this column. This is the most damning. If this report is true, if this report that I'm holding and my formerly fingerprinted fingertips is true, Biden is going to get us into World War III. And again, I am telling you right now, I went from being absolutely loving Zelensky to not being able to stand Zelensky, and now understanding the position Zelensky finds himself in, despite how corrupt Ukraine might be. Zelensky is nothing but a pawn. Zelensky is nothing but a pawn. He's a subcontractor. He's an employee. Carl, contractor, an employee for who? Zelensky, this is my opinion as of now. If this report by Seymour Hersh is true, and we're going to go through it. If this report is true, here's my take. Here's my take on Zelensky now. You may hate him. You may love him. He's a pawn. He's a pawn. Zelensky now understands the game that he's been put in. He's working for Biden. He's working for NATO, and he's saying, in my opinion, okay, if I'm going to fight this war for you, you're going to give me what I need, and you're going to pay me. And honestly, if this report is true, I do not blame him. I don't blame him. He came here begging for money. I was like, can't stand this guy anymore. I don't blame him. This report is absolutely damning. And I want to play this video right away because Biden gave up the ghost. This fool is going to get us into World War III, either intentionally or by sheer incompetence. Either way, I fear, and I'm just being straight up blunt with you, that we are much closer to a World War III than you could ever possibly fathom. Going through this made me sick to my stomach. And I got to be honest with you. This is the perfect time. I don't normally do this because it sounds like a sales pitch, but it's so true. Please, 4patriots.com. Please go to 4patriots.com. I am telling you right now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. You guys know me. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but when the facts come out, I report the truth to you. This is your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. The left is trying to make us crazy. They are playing psyops against us. We're not crazy. We are not crazy. 4patriots.com. Stock up on your food supply, on your survival kit right now. Right now, you go to 4patriots.com. Use the promo code Carl. Get 10% off of your first order. You get a 3-month survival kit. Or this includes a 3-month survival kit. Also, you'll get a year-long guarantee plus free shipping on orders that are over $97. Just use my name. A bit of every purchase goes out to help charities that helps out veterans and their families. All right, so go to the number 4patriots.com. Guys, I kid you not. I am concerned about you. I love you. Stock up. Protect your family. These kits are compact. They're sturdy. They're water resistant. They last for 25 years. And God forbid you need them, but be prepared just in case you do. All right. Also, mypillow.com. Guys, you're going to listen, they got MyPillow 2.0s out. Go to mypillow.com to receive a special discount on the new MyPillows. All right. MyPillow.com. Use the promo code Carl. Just click the radio listener square at the top of the page. That's mypillow.com. Use the promo code Carl or give them a call, 800-858-0263. Whether you need towels, whether you need bed sheets, if you need a dog bed, if you want My Pillows, the OGs, if you want My Pillow Part 2, just go to mypillow.com. Use the promo code Carl. All right, guys. So I said this at the very beginning of this podcast. Biden is getting us into World War III, or he's going to get us into World War III. He's intentionally escalated the Russia-Ukraine war by blowing up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And by the way, this is his fault. Why is this his fault? Why did he do it? Well, guys, remember, Biden shut down the Keystone XL pipeline, costing America 900,000 barrels of oil a day that were going to come online. And the idiot also costing us jobs, right, as well. And at the same time, what he did, this guy that claims that Putin is this evil dictator, which I think Putin is, but so is Biden. All right. And so he shuts down the Keystone XL pipeline. He damages America. Meanwhile, he's calling Russia or Vladimir Putin this evil dictator, yet he waives Trump's sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and gives Putin permission to transfer gas using the Baltic Sea or via pipeline through the Baltic Sea to Germany, one of our NATO allies. All right. So now Zelensky is in this picture. Vladimir Putin is getting ready to invade Ukraine. And Zelensky is seen as a hero for standing up. You can see him initially. The guy was scared to his core. You could see it. He was pale. He didn't understand, I don't think completely, that he was about to be killed, or at least we all thought at the time. Eventually, my belief is he's figured out the game and he said, okay, America, Biden, you want me to fight your war? NATO, you want me to fight your war against Putin, a war that is completely unnecessary, a war that completely did not need to be started? Then you're going to make sure that you supply me with weapons, because I think they would have allowed Zelensky to be a casualty of war. Hey, take him out. You know, we've got evidence that Biden is corrupt as hell there. Take him out. I don't care, Putin. You know, but then when people started rising up, Biden is like, oh my God, I got to do something about it. This guy is incompetent. This guy is evil, and he's got to go. And guys, I don't recall if I said it here on the podcast. I don't recall if I said it if I was sitting in for Larry Elder, but I do remember, or on my own local radio show. But I know for a fact, I remember talking about this. Man, I wish I could go back and find. I remember talking about this Nord Stream 2 being blown up, and I said to my listening audience, I said to those of you in the listening audience, this makes no sense whatsoever to me that Putin, because that was a blame game, that Putin would blow up his own pipelines and lose his leverage. In order to gain sympathy from the rest of the world. Now, I get there's psyops, I get there's propaganda, but that made no sense to me because he would lose his leverage. And I said it at the time, despite mainstream media and even other conservative outlets saying, I don't know that, Putin is crazy enough to do something like this. It just didn't make sense to me. It just didn't sit right. Now, I was confused. I admit that I wasn't definitive on my answer simply because you had so many people that I expected knew better than me sitting there saying the opposite. But I continue to say this does not make sense to me and question why the heck would he leverage his own, or why would he destroy his own leverage? Never made sense to me. And now we know we've got a deep state and we've got a president that is so corrupt, you can't believe anything they say anymore. You cannot believe a word of what they say anymore. So I want to get into this column. Before I do, I'm going to play this video, and I actually do have to bring you some more heartbreaking news because apparently there's a serial killer out that likes shooting Republicans. Here, listen to this. Or not listen to this, but yeah, listen to this anyway. If you're tuning into the Carl Jackson Show podcast, follow me on social media, The Carl Jackson Show. Guys, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Carl Jackson Show on YouTube. All right. New Jersey Councilman Russell Heller killed in murder suicide at PSENG facility. Hey, Carl, we know that. We heard the news that a New Jersey councilman was killed last week. Oh, no. That was the woman. So this week, a New Jersey councilman that happens to be a Republican was also shot dead, ironically. That's pretty amazing. New Jersey mafia. Huh? Oh, okay. Never mind. New Jersey councilman Russell Heller killed in murder suicide at PSENG facility. Russell Heller was only 51. The local New Jersey council member Russell Heller was shot dead in his car. Oh, just like the lady last week. Exactly 1 week after the slaying of councilwoman, whom you might have been thinking of, Eunice Dwumfor. This according to reports. Authorities responded to calls that a person had been shot at the PSENG facility in Franklin Township just after 7 a.m. Wednesday. Heller, 51, was found shot dead outside his car. This according to the Somerset County Prosecutor's Office. Reports say he was a senior distribution supervisor who had been with the company for 11 years and a councilman in Milford, a small borough in Hunterdon County. The Milford Borough Council is deeply saddened, they say, by the loss, and our hearts go out to his family. Milford Mayor Henry Shepins told digital news content provider NJ.com, he was so full of life. It's just unbelievable that he's gone. Something like this has never happened in borough history. We are very shaken by this. Well, Republicans should be shaken by this. Gary Curtis, 58, was identified as a suspect in the shooting and found at 10:20 a.m. inside a car in Bridgewater, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Somerset County prosecutor's office said, "Oh, I'm glad they found their conveniently found their shooter dead there." Yeah. So anyway, I'm sorry. I don't believe anything anymore. I'm not even a conspiracy theorist. Okay, he's found dead. I don't believe crap anymore. Where's the video? I hate to be like this, but this is where I am. The killing again comes 1 week after the slaying of Sayreville councilwoman Eunice Dwumfor, who was found dead in her vehicle with multiple gunshot wounds as well. Let me just read this part. Both slain council members were elected Republicans. Heller was last elected in 2020, Dwumfor to her first term in 2021. So apparently we've got a Republican serial killer on the loose. So I guess not, because they found this shooter. They haven't found the one for Dwumfor. So I hope that, listen, I this is morbid, but I hope it's not a serial killer. I hope that this guy is responsible for the killing. I hope there's plenty of evidence to suggest that, and I hope they find the murderer for Dwumfor as well. So I had to bring that to you before this gets even more depressing. Carl, give us some solutions. All right. If we don't know the problem, if we don't know the problems with our country, we're not going to be able to fix the problems. Biden is a problem. The deep state is a problem. This has to be corrected. I want you guys to brace yourself. Here's when Biden, and this is going to come back. This is going to come back to haunt him, and hopefully not us. Hopefully not us. You'll see what I mean shortly here. But here's Biden on the precipice of starting World War III without the help of Congress, and we had no idea. But this is a very scary video. Once we go through this Seymour Hersh reporting, Seymour Hersh, Substack.com, how America took out the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. This is the most important story of the day, perhaps the week, and quite some time, frankly, besides the Twitter files. Gabe, let's go ahead and roll the clip, por favor.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do
it. Wow. I promise you, we will be able to do that, says the man that gave Vladimir Putin the permission or waived the sanctions so Vladimir Putin could carry on with Nord Stream 2 pipeline, sending Russian gas to Germany, to our NATO ally. Guys, we didn't realize how damning that video was at the time. But there are some people that realize how damning and dangerous that video was at the time. The CIA. And I will get into that shortly. But first, I want to report one more thing to you. And I wanted to bring you video of this. But unfortunately, I could no longer find the video today. Isn't that amazing? But I could not find the video this morning. Found it easily last night. But as I was doing a Google search, Google, the left-wing propagandists and radicals that don't allow you to search for crap, anything conservative. I mean, it's insane how left-wing and crazy Google has become. Actually, it's not insane. None of this stuff should surprise anyone, at least of all me at this point. It's insane. It is crazy. Hat tip, just the news. FBI whistleblower raises fresh concerns about bank record mining, undercover agents, and J6 probe. All right, so a recently retired FBI supervisory intelligence analyst told Congress in a whistleblower disclosure that agents in Boston were improperly pressured by Washington to open criminal cases on 140 people who had simply taken a bus ride to the J6 rally in Washington. The agents refused, thank God, because there was no evidence the attendees engaged in any criminal criminality whatsoever, the whistleblower said. George Hill's testimony to the House Judiciary Committee also raised a new civil liberty concerns about the FBI's January 6 probe, including whether the Bureau mined Americans' bank records without court authority and whether the agency possesses video footage it is refusing to release because it identifies undercover agents and human sources who were at the U.S. Capitol that fateful day. Hill is a military veteran, a longtime analyst for the NSA and FBI, who retired last year from the Bureau's Boston field office. He told Just the News on Wednesday night, that's John Solomon's organization, that he disclosed concerns earlier this week to the House Judiciary Committee during a transcribed deposition, including that the Bureau analyzed banking data without evidence. of a crime simply to find Americans who traveled to Washington around the time of J6 or who owned a gun. This White House has turned the deep state on all of us that love America, that all of us who love the Second Amendment. They are willing to do anything. They are evil. They are corrupt. This is not only the worst president in American history. I contend this is the most evil. This is the most corrupt president in American history. And it takes a lot to say that. Biden and his administration are the epitome of evil. Hat tip Seymour Hersh, a Substack. Guys, I've never done this before, but I'm going to ask you to bear with me because every single sentence in this report, if true, is so damning and so scary, you're probably going to need Alka-Seltzer or what is that to you, a Tums, to make sure your stomach doesn't brew. As I was reading this earlier today, just going through it, I went through the entire thing, and I'm going to go through it with you. I don't even know how to explain it, but I'm going to do it anyway because obviously that's what I'm here to do. For the first time, I felt like World War III wasn't just a possibility, but inevitable under this administration. And I pray to God that I'm wrong. Congress, Speaker McCarthy, they have to reclaim the power of the purse totally. They have to take it from this guy. There has to be new legislation adopted where we must declare war before we take on any type of military confrontation. Hat tip Seymour Hersh of Substack.com, How America Took Out the Nord Stream 2 Pipeline. This is fascinating. No one's going to be able to go through, bit by bit with this, about this story with you, but we're going to do it here. You're not going to get this on TV. You're not going to get a lot of this on radio, but you're going to get it here at the Carl Jackson Show podcast. This isn't something that I would normally do, but I think this is so vital. This is so important that we just need to go through the reporter's words. Seymour Hersh at Substack.com. or .substack.com. The U.S. Navy's Diving and Salvage Center can be found in a location as obscure as its name, down what was once a country lane in rural Panama City, now booming resort city in the southwestern panhandle of Florida. I'm familiar with that area. Well, not that familiar, but I know where it is, all right? 70 miles south of the Alabama border. The center's complex is a nondescript is as nondescript as its location, he writes. A drab, concrete, post-World War II structure that has the look of a vocational high school on the west side of Chicago. A coin-operated laundromat and a dance school are right across the street, what is now a 4-lane road. The center has been training highly skilled deep water divers for decades, who once assigned to American military units worldwide are capable of technical diving to do the good, using C4 explosives to clear harbors and beaches of debris and unexploded ordnance, as well as the bad, like blowing up foreign oil rigs, fouling intake valves for undersea power plants, destroying locks on crucial shipping canals. The Panama City Center, which boasts the second largest indoor pool in America, was the perfect place to recruit the best and most taciturn graduates of the diving school who successfully did last summer what they had been authorized to do 260 feet under the surface of the Baltic Sea. Remember what the video said. If Biden needed to do that, Germany's permission or whatever, if Biden needed to disrupt the Nord Stream 2 pipeline or pipelines, he would do so. He could get it done. Last June, the Navy divers operating under the cover of a widely publicized midsummer NATO exercise known as Baltops 2, BALTOPS 22, planted the remotely triggered explosives that 3 months later destroyed 3 of the 4 Nord Stream pipelines, according to a source with direct knowledge of the operational planning. We're going to go through the planning of this and the operations of this. It's movie stuff. It really is. It really is. 2 of the pipelines, which were known collectively as Nord Stream 1, had been providing Germany and much of Western Europe, by the way, with cheap Russian natural gas for more than a decade. A second pair of pipelines called Nord Stream 2 had been built but were not yet operational. Is it possible? Ask yourself this question. Is it possible that Biden would be willing to get America and NATO into a war against Putin to cover his own tracks, to cover his own corruption? That sounds so simplistic. I don't put it past him anymore. I'm telling you, we are watching the devil incarnate in the White House. His administration as well. I don't say that to be hyperbolic. This guy is going to get us into World War III. He intentionally escalated the Russia-Ukraine war. Seymour Hersh goes on now. With Russian troops massing on the Ukrainian border and the bloodiest war in Europe since 1945 looming, President Joe Biden saw the pipelines as a vehicle for Vladimir Putin to weaponize natural gas for his political and territorial ambitions. This is the same idiot. Total moron that removed Trump's sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Do you understand why this man shouldn't even be allowed near the White House, let alone the resident of the White House? As for comment, Adrian Watson, a White House spokesperson, said in an email, quote, "This is false and complete fiction," close quote. Tammy Thorpe, a spokesperson for the CIA, similarly wrote, quote, "This claim is completely and utterly false." Biden's decision to sabotage the pipeline came after more than 9 months of highly secret back and forth debate inside Washington's national security community about how to best achieve the goal. For much of that time, the issue was not whether to do the mission, but how to get it done with no overt clue as to who was responsible. I'm guessing Vladimir Putin figured it out pretty quickly. This is maddening. I'm sorry. I'm frustrated. And I'm frustrated for you. I'm frustrated for all of us. I'm frustrated even for the ignoramuses that voted for this guy. There was a vital bureaucratic reason for relying on the graduates of the center's hardcore diving school in Panama City. The divers were Navy only and not members of America's Special Operations Command, whose covert operations must be reported. This is so freaking important. This is how they circumvented, or this is one of the ways in which they've circumvented Congress. This is why this is so dangerous. I don't think we should have any kinetic activity. I just learned that word not too long ago. Actually, during Obama's administration, without the okay from Congress. There was a vital bureaucratic reason for relying on the graduates of the center's hardcore diving school in Panama. The divers were Navy only, not members of America's Special Operations Command, whose covert operations must be recorded to Congress and briefed in advance to the Senate and House leadership, the so-called Gang of Eight. Isn't that amazing? So if you wanted to go out and start a war and start some trouble around the world, you could do so without notifying Congress. The Biden administration was doing everything possible to avoid leaks as the planning took place late in 2021. President Biden and his foreign policy team, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, This freaking jerk. Secretary of State Tony Blinken. Freaking morons. And Victoria Nuland, another one. The Undersecretary of Policy. All of these guys. Such a danger. They are a danger. They are a liability to the United States of America. Undersecretary of State for Policy, Victoria Nuland, had been vocal and consistent with their hostility to the two pipelines, which ran side by side for 750 miles under the Baltic Sea from two different ports in northeastern Russia near the Estonian border, passing close to the Danish island of Bornholm before ending in northern Germany. All right. And I'm sorry, guys, I have to read this directly. It was just too much to read this morning. Try to digest and take notes. I'll just read it through if you will bear with me. You are listening to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you do get your podcast. We would really love to see you on YouTube, the Carl Jackson Show on YouTube. Also, our Instagram account, we'd love to see you there. If you're on social media, follow us on Instagram, the Carl Jackson Show. Excuse me. Also, we're on Twitter, we're on Getter, we're on Truth Social. Wherever I am on social media, The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me, or at The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me. And also, please don't forget our sponsors, MyPillow.com. Right now, they got their new pillows, MyPillow 2.0. Guys, these are the best pillows out. Listen, you can get them contoured to where they fit you specifically. All right, so make sure you go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener square at the top of the page, use the promo code Carl, or give them a call, 800-858-0263. Biden is going to get us into World War III if we're not careful. Be prepared. Be prepared. God forbid. Everyone, the world knows this guy is weak. The guy, everyone knows this guy is a complete and utter moron. They know he's incompetent, and they know he's also capable of doing stupid crap like this. The direct route, as I read on, which bypassed any need to transit Ukraine, had been a boon for the German economy, all right, which enjoyed an abundance of cheap Russian natural gas. So, I mean, Germany are just idiots. I'm sorry, they're just idiots. Why would you work with Russia? You're so concerned about Russia. Why would you work with them? Oh, man. So anyway, let me read that again. I'm sorry. The direct route, which bypassed any need to transit Ukraine, had been a boon for the German economy, which enjoyed an abundance of cheap Russian natural gas, enough to run its factories and heat its homes, with enabling German distributors to sell excess gas at a profit throughout Western Europe. The greenies wanted to sell excess natural gas. Action that could be traced to the administration would violate U.S. promises to minimize direct conflict with Russia. Secrecy was essential. Seymour Hersh says. From its earliest days, Nord Stream 1 was seen by Washington and its anti-Russian NATO partners as a threat to Western dominance. The holding company behind it, Nord Stream AG, was incorporated in Switzerland in 2005 in partnership with Gazprom, a publicly traded Russian company producing enormous profits for shareholders, which is dominated by oligarchs known to be in the thrall of Putin. Gazprom controlled 51% of the company, with 4 European energy firms, 1 in France, 1 in the Netherlands, and 2 in Germany, sharing the remaining 49% of stock and having the right to control downstream sales of the inexpensive natural gas to local distributors in Germany, Western Europe, and Western Europe. Gazprom's profits were shared with the Russian government, and state gas and oil revenues were estimated in some years to amount to as much as 45% of Russia's annual budget. Holy smokes. Guys, remember this. Biden cut off the Keystone XL pipeline. He's waged war on fossil fuels. If we were to remain energy independent, none of this is necessary. Do you see how vital it is not to kiss the booty of these climate change, actually it's global warming nut jobs over this freaking hoax? This freaking hoax is going to get us into a world war. Do you see how important fossil fuels are? America's political fears were real. Putin would now have an additional and much needed major source of income in Germany and the rest of Western Europe would become addicted to low-cost natural gas that was supplied by Russia, while diminishing European reliance on America. In fact, that's exactly what happened. Many Germans saw Nord Stream 1 as part of the deliverance of former Chancellor Willy Brandt's famed Ostpolitik theory, which would enable post-war Germany to rehabilitate itself and other European nations that were destroyed in World War II by, among other initiatives, utilizing cheap Russian gas to fuel a prosperous Western European market and a trading company. Nord Stream 1 was dangerous enough in the view of NATO and Washington, but Nord Stream 2, whose construction was completed in September of 21, would, if approved by German regulators, double the amount of cheap gas that would be available to Germany and Western Europe. The second pipeline also would provide enough gas for more than 50% of Germany's annual consumption. Tensions were constantly escalating between Russia and NATO, backed by the aggressive foreign policy of the Biden administration. Biden is escalating tensions between Russia and NATO. Opposition to Nord Stream 2 flared on the eve of the Biden inauguration in January of 2021, when Senate Republicans, led by Ted Cruz of Texas, repeatedly raised the political threat of cheap Russian natural gas during the confirmation hearing of Blinken as Secretary of State. By then, a unified Senate had successfully passed a law that said, as Cruz told Blinken, quote, halted the pipeline in its tracks, close quote. There would be enormous political and economic pressure from the German government, then headed by Angela Merkel, to get the second pipeline online. Would Biden stand up to the Germans? Blinken said yes, but added that he had not discussed the specifics of the incoming president's views. And he said, quote, I know his strong conviction that this is a bad idea, the Nord Stream 2, close quote. He said, I know that he would have us use every persuasive tool that we have to convince our friends and partners, including Germany, not to move forward with it, close quote. Speaking of Nord Stream 2, a few months later, as the construction of the second pipeline near completion, Biden blinked. Oh, my God. That made a stunning turnaround. The administration waived sanctions against Nord Stream AG, with a State Department official conceding that trying to stop the pipeline through sanctions and diplomacy had, quote, always been a long shot. Always been a long shot. I'm sorry. I'm just going nuts rereading this crap. Behind the scenes, administration officials reportedly urged Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, by then facing a threat of Russian invasion, not to criticize the move. Did you hear that? Behind the scenes. I'm outlining this so I don't forget this crap. I'm storing this stuff. Behind the scenes, administration officials reportedly urged Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, by then facing a threat of Russian invasion, not to criticize the move. Volodymyr Zelensky is a pawn. I went from, again, loving the guy to hating the guy. Here's what Zelensky figured out. Corrupt or not, you can hate him all you want. I think he becomes more relevant, except in this sense. America needed him. He was going to be their pawn. He was going to be Biden's pawn. He was going to shut his mouth. He was going to get killed anyway, or so they thought, except that the Ukrainian military fought better than Biden imagined. Putin didn't kill him like I think Biden wanted. And then this guy was like, okay, if I'm going to be in this, if I'm going to play your game, you're going to pay me. You're going to help keep us safe. You're going to pay me. There were immediate consequences. Senate Republicans led by Cruz announced an immediate blockade of all of Biden's foreign policy nominees and delayed passage of the annual defense bill for months deep into the fall. Good job, Ted Cruz. Politico later depicted Biden's turnabout on the second Russian pipeline as the, quote, the one decision, arguably more than the chaotic military withdrawal from Afghanistan that has imperiled Biden's agenda, close quote. The administration was floundering, despite getting a reprieve on the crisis in mid-November when Germany's energy regulators suspended approval of the second Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Natural gas prices surged 8% within days amid growing fears in Germany and Europe that the pipeline suspension and the growing possibility of a war between Russia and Ukraine would lead to a very much unwanted cold winter. It was not clear to Washington just where Olaf Scholz, Germany's newly appointed chancellor, stood. Months earlier, after the fall of Afghanistan, Scholz had publicly endorsed French President Emmanuel Macron's call for a more autonomous European foreign policy in a speech in Prague, clearly suggesting less reliance on Washington and its mercurial actions. They didn't want to rely on Biden. Thoughtful throughout all of this, Russian troops had been steadily and ominously building up on the borders of Ukraine. And by the end of December, more than 100,000 soldiers were in position to strike from Belarus and Crimea. Alarm was growing in Washington, including an assessment from Blinken that those troop numbers could be, quote, doubled in short order, close quote. The administration's attention once again was focused on Nord Stream, the pipeline that Biden okayed. Nord Stream 2 anyway. As long as Europe remained dependent on the pipelines for cheap natural gas, Washington was afraid that countries like Germany would be reluctant to supply Ukraine with the money and weapons it needed to defeat Russia in order to fight, in other words, to fight for Biden. So how do you coax Russia into getting into a war that they didn't want to be in? You blow up the Nord Stream pipelines. It was at this unsettled moment that Biden authorized Jake Sullivan to bring together an interagency group to come up with a plan. All options were on the table, but only one emerged. Guys, you're listening to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. I've not done this before, but I think this is so important to go through this entire column, this entire report by Seymour Hersh of Substack. This is damning. Biden escalated the Russia-Ukraine war. He has virtually gotten us into World War III, whether through intentionality, whether through incompetence. America is much closer today to World War III than we ever could have imagined. I got to take a swig here. By the way, this show is brought to you by MyPillow.com. MyPillow.com. Use the promo code Carl at the top of the page. Please support American jobs, American manufacturing. Please support our sponsors. Without them, we simply can't bring you the show. We definitely need your help in doing that. Also, 4patriots.com, the number 4patriots.com. Guys, seriously, get yourself some survival food. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not one of conspiracy is becoming fact. Let's put it that way. Be prepared. Make sure your family is prepared. 4patriots.com. If you use my name, you'll get 10% off of your first purchase. Purchases that are over $97, you'll get free shipping. So make sure you take advantage of that. The food is good for 25 years, stacks easily. It's water resistant. Just make sure your family is safe. If no one else plans, make sure that you plan. Let me take a swig, and then I want to talk about planning a little bit as we finish up with this report. This is where it goes Hollywood. This stuff is crazy. This is the stuff that you would see in Tom Cruise's MI2 movies, and you're like, that could only be done in movies. No. Our military is so bad, they can do some of this stuff in real life. In December of 2021, 2 months before the first Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine, Jake Sullivan convened a meeting of a newly formed task force. men and women from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the CIA, and the State and Treasury departments, and asked for recommendations about how to respond to Putin's impending invasion. It will be the first of a series of top secret meetings in a secure room on a top floor of the old executive office building adjacent to the White House that was also the home of the president's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. There was the usual back and forth chatter that eventually led to a crucial preliminary question: would the recommendation forwarded by the group to the president be reversible, such as another layer of sanctions and currency restrictions, or irreversible, that is, kinetic actions which could not be undone? What became clear to participants, according to the source with direct knowledge of the process, is that Sullivan intended for the group to come up with a plan for the destruction of 2 Nord Stream pipelines, and that he was delivering on the desires of Biden. Over the next several meetings, the participants debated options for an attack. The Navy proposed using a newly commissioned submarine to assault the pipeline directly. The Air Force discussed dropping bombs with delayed fuses that could be set off remotely. The CIA argued that whatever was done, it would have to be covert. Everyone involved understood the stakes. Quote, "This is not kiddie stuff," close quote. The source said, if the attack were traceable to the United States, quote, "it's an act of war." What became clear to participants, according to the source with direct knowledge of the process, is that Sullivan intended for the group to come up with a plan for the destruction of the 2 Nord Stream pipelines, which I've read, and that he was delivering on the desires of Biden. All right, so this is no kiddie stuff. And basically is what the source said. If they get caught, if it's traceable to the U.S., this is an act of war. Destroying Nord Stream 2 or destroying the Nord Stream pipelines is an act of war. At the time, the CIA was directed by William Burns, a mild-mannered former ambassador to Russia who had served as Deputy Secretary of State in the Obama administration. Burns quickly authorized an agency working group whose ad hoc members included, by chance, someone who was familiar with the capabilities of the Navy's deep-sea divers that are located in Panama City, Florida. Over the next 3 weeks, members of the CIA's working group began to craft a plan for a covert operation that would use deep-sea divers to trigger an explosion along the pipeline. Something like this hadn't been done or had been done before, in 1971. The American intelligence community learned from still undisclosed sources that 2 important units of the Russian Navy were communicating via an undersea cable that was buried in the Sea of I can't even pronounce this, Okhotsk, on Russia's far east coast. The cable linked a regional Navy command to the mainland headquarters of Vladivostok. This was in 1971. A handpicked team of Central Intelligence Agency and National Security Advisors, so the CIA, the NSA, operatives, was assembled somewhere in the Washington area under deep cover and worked out a plan using Navy divers, modified submarines, and a deep submarine rescue vehicle that succeeded after much trial and error in locating the Russian cable. The divers planted a sophisticated listening device on the cable that successfully interrupted the Russian traffic and recorded it on a taping system. The NSA learned that senior Russian Navy officers, still speaking of 1971, convinced of the security of their communication link, chatted away with their peers without encryption. The recording device and its tape had to be replaced monthly, and the project rode on merrily for a decade until it was compromised by a 44-year-old civilian NSA technician named Ronald Pelton, who was fluent in Russian. Pelton was betrayed by a Russian defector. What's his name? Edward Snowden? Pelton was betrayed by a Russian defector in 1985 and sentenced to prison. He was paid just $5,000 by the Russians for his revelations about the operation, along with $35,000 for other Russian operational data he provided that was never made public. Isn't that convenient? That underwater success, codenamed Ivy Bells, was innovative and risky and produced invaluable intelligence about the Russian Navy's intentions and planning. Still, the Interagency Group, was initially skeptical of the CIA's enthusiasm for a covert deep sea attack. There were too many unanswered questions. The waters of the Baltic Sea were heavily patrolled by the Russian Navy, and there were no oil rigs that could be used as a cover for a diving operation. Would the divers have to go to Estonia, right across the border from Russia's natural gas loading docks, to train for the mission? It would be a GOAT F, quote unquote, except they used the real word, the agency was told. Throughout, quote, all of this scheming, close quote, the source said, quote, some working guys in the CIA and the State Department were saying, don't do this. It's stupid. And it will be a political nightmare if it comes out, close quote. Nevertheless, in early 2022, the CIA working group reported back to Sullivan's interagency group, we have a way to blow up the pipelines, quote unquote. What came next was stunning. On February 7th, less than 3 weeks before the seemingly inevitable Russian invasion of Ukraine, Biden met in his White House office with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who, after some wobbling, was now firmly on the American team. At the press briefing that followed, Biden defiantly said, quote, if Russia invades, there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it. Guys, you watch the video. All right. 20 days earlier, Undersecretary Nuland had delivered essentially the same message at a State Department briefing with little press coverage. And she said, and I quote, I want to be very clear to you today in response to a question. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward, close quote. Several of those involved in planning the pipeline mission were dismayed by what they viewed as indirect references to the attack. Quote, it was like putting an atomic bomb on the ground in Tokyo and telling the Japanese that we are going to detonate it. That's what the source said, close quote. The plan was, quoting again from the source, was for the options to be executed post-invasion and not advertised publicly. Biden simply didn't get it, right? He's either too damn dumb or he ignored it. Close quote. Biden's and Nuland's indiscretion, I want you to listen to this. If that is what it was, might have frustrated some of the planners. Why? Why, Carl? Why would it have frustrated some of the planners? I'm glad you asked, because I'll read on. But it also created an opportunity. According to the source, some of the senior officials of the CIA determined that blowing up the pipeline, listen to this, quote, no longer could be considered a covert option because the president just announced that we knew how to do it. Now, what does this mean? Good question. The plan to blow up Nord Stream 1 and 2 was suddenly downgraded from a covert operation. Listen to this. Listen to this. Requiring that Congress, so it's no longer a covert operation. So now, since it's no longer covert, there's no longer a requirement that Congress be informed to one that was deemed a highly classified intelligence operation with U.S. military support. That is crucial. Again, we run into this for a second time. Using the divers, Congress didn't, the Navy divers that weren't special operations commanders. And no need to tell Congress. Now that it's no longer covert, since Biden blotted the crap out on national television, the operation is no longer covert. No need to bother with Congress anymore. You see what's happening here? This freaking authoritarian, whether through incompetence or intentionality is just accumulating power for himself. Oh my God, this is driving me nuts. I'm sorry, guys. The plan to blow up again Nord Stream 1 and 2 was suddenly downgraded from a covert operation requiring that Congress be informed to one that was deemed as highly classified intelligence operation with U.S. military support. Under the law, the source explained there was no longer a legal requirement to report the operation to Congress. No longer a legal requirement. So either Biden and his team, Jake Sullivan, knew what they were doing or they were incompetent. Either way, they damn near got us into World War III. And they lied about it. They put the onus on Putin when it was them. This is the most... I read stories every week with this guy, and I'm like, it can't get worse. And it gets worse. It just gets worse. It just gets worse. There was no longer a legal requirement to report the operation to Congress. All they had to do now is just do it. But it still had to be secret. The Russians have superlative surveillance of the Baltic Sea. The agency working group members had no direct contact with the White House and were eager to find out if the president meant what he said. That is, if the mission was now a go. The source recalled, quote, Bill Burns comes back and says, do it, close quote. The Norwegian Navy was quick to find the right spot, right in the shallow water a few miles off of Denmark's Bornholm Island. The Operation Norway was the perfect place to base the mission. In the past few years, off East-West crisis, the U.S. military has vastly expanded its presence inside of Norway, whose western border runs 1,400 miles along the northern or North Atlantic Ocean and merges above the Arctic Circle with Russia. The Pentagon has created high-paying jobs and contracts amid some local controversy by investing hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade and expand American Navy and Air Force facilities in Norway. The new works included, most importantly, an advanced synthetic aperture radar far up north that was capable of penetrating deep into Russia and came online just as the American intelligence community lost access to a series of long-range listening sites inside of China. A newly refurbished American submarine base, which had been under construction for years, had become operational. And more American submarines were now able to work closely with their Norwegian colleagues to monitor and spy on a major Russian nuclear redoubt 250 miles to the east on the Kola Peninsula. America also has vastly expanded a Norwegian air base in the north and delivered to the Norwegian Air Force a fleet of Boeing-built P-8 Poseidon patrol planes to bolster its long-range spying on all things Russia. In return, the Norwegian government angered liberals and some moderates in its parliament last November by passing the Supplementary Defense Coordination Agreement. Under the New Deal, the U.S. legal system would have jurisdiction in certain agreed areas, quote unquote, in the north over American soldiers accused of crimes off base, as well as over those Norwegian citizens accused or suspected of interfering with the work at the base. Norway was one of the original signatories of NATO in NATO treaty in 1949. In the early days of the Cold War. Today, the supreme commander of NATO is Jens Stoltenberg, a committed anti-communist who served as Norway's prime minister for 8 years before moving to his high NATO post with American backing in 2014. He was a hardliner on all things Putin and Russia, who had cooperated with the American intelligence community since the Vietnam War. He has been trusted completely since, quote, he is the glove that fits the American hand, close quote, the source said. See, the problem is we're still fighting this Cold War that doesn't exist in the same way. Back in Washington, planners knew they had to go to Norway. They hated the Russians, and I'm quoting, excuse me. And the Norwegian Navy was full of superb sailors and divers who had generations of experience in highly profitable deep sea oil and gas exploration, close quote. This according to the source. They also could be trusted to keep the mission secret. The Norwegians may have had other interests as well, The destruction of Nord Stream, listen to this, if the Americans could pull it off, would allow Norway to sell vastly more of its own natural gas to Europe. Oh, man, how convenient. Sometime in March, a few members of the team flew to Norway to meet the Norwegian Secret Service and Navy. One of the key questions was where exactly in the Baltic Sea was the best place to plant the explosives. Nord Stream 1 and 2, each with two sets of pipelines, were separated much of the way by little more than a mile as they made their run to the port of Greifswald in the far northeast of Germany. The Norwegian Navy was quick to find the right spot in the shallow waters of the Baltic Sea, a few miles off Denmark's Bornholm Island. The pipelines ran more than a mile apart along a seafloor that was only 260 feet deep. That would be well within the range of the divers who, operating from a Norwegian Alta-class mine hunter, would dive with a mixture of oxygen, nitrogen, and helium streaming from their tanks and plant-shaped C4 charges on the four pipelines with concrete protective covers. It would be tedious, it would be time-consuming and dangerous work, but the waters off Bornholm had another advantage. There were no major tidal currents, which would have made the task of diving much more difficult. After a bit of research, the Americans were all in. At this point, the Navy's obscure deep diving group that's in Panama City once again came into play. The deep sea schools at Panama City, whose trainees participated in Ivy Bells, are seen as an unwanted backwater by the elite graduates of the Naval Academy in Annapolis, who typically seek the glory of being assigned as a SEAL, fighter pilot, or submariner. If one must become a black shoe, quote unquote, that is a member of the less desirable surface ship command, there is always at least duty on a destroyer, cruiser, or an amphibious ship. The least glamorous of all is mine warfare. Its divers never appear in Hollywood movies, maybe now they will, or on the cover of popular magazines. Quote, the best divers with deep diving qualifications are a tight community, and only the very best are recruited for the operation and told to be prepared to be summoned to the CIA in Washington. In other words, no DEI there, no CRT there. The Norwegians and Americans had a location and the operatives. But there was another concern. Any unusual, listen to this, underwater activity. This is MI2 stuff, Hollywood stuff. In the waters off Bornholm might draw the attention of the Swedish or Danish navies, which could report it. So Denmark had also been one of the original NATO signers and was known in the intelligence community for its special ties to the UK. All right. Sweden had applied for membership into NATO and had demonstrated its great skill in managing its underwater sound and magnetic sensor systems that successfully tracked Russian submarines that would occasionally show up in remote waters of the Swedish archipelago, I don't know how to pronounce that word, and be forced to the surface. The Norwegians joined the Americans in insisting that some senior officials in Denmark, Sweden, had to be briefed in general terms about the possible diving activity that was taking place in that area. And that way, someone higher up could intervene and keep a report out of the chain of command, thus insulating the pipeline operation. Close quote from the source. What they were told and what they knew were purposely different. The Norwegian embassy asked to comment on this story. They did not respond. The Norwegians were key to solving other hurdles. The Russian Navy was known to possess surveillance technology capable of spotting, triggering underwater mines. The American explosive devices needed to be camouflaged in a way that would make them appear to the Russian system as part of the natural background, something that required adapting to the specific salinity of the water. The Norwegians had a fix. The Norwegians also had a solution to the crucial question of when the operation should take place. Every June, for the past 21 years, the American Sixth Fleet, whose flagship is based in Gaeta, Italy, south of Rome, has sponsored a major NATO exercise in the Baltic Sea that involves scores of Allied ships throughout the region. The current exercise that is held in June would be known as Baltic Operation 2022 or Baltops 2022. The Norwegians propose this would be the ideal cover to plant the mines. The Americans provided one vital element. They convinced the Sixth Fleet planners to add a research and development exercise to the program. The exercises made public by the Navy involved the Sixth Fleet in collaboration with the Navy's, quote, research and warfare centers, close quote. The at-sea event would be held off the coast of Bornholm Island and involved NATO teams of divers planting mines with competing teams using the latest underwater technology to find and destroy them. It was both a useful exercise and ingenious cover. The Panama City boys would do their thing, and the C4 explosives would be in a place by the end of Ball Tops 2022 with a 48-hour timer attached. All of the Americans and Norwegians would be long gone by the first explosion, but things get sticky. The days were counting down. Quote, the clock was ticking and we were nearing mission accomplished, close quote, this according to the source. And then Washington had second thoughts, meaning Biden. The bombs would still be planted during Ball Tops, but the White House worried that a 2-day window for their detonation would be too close, or meaning Jake Sullivan, would be too close to the end of the exercise, and it would be obvious that America had been involved. Instead, the White House had a new request, quote, can the guys in the field come up with some way to blow the pipelines later on command, close quote. Some members of the planning team were angered and frustrated by the president's seeming indecision. The Panama City divers had repeatedly practiced planting the C4 on pipelines as they would be bringing during Ball Tops. But now the team in Norway had to come up with a way to give Biden what he wanted. The ability to issue a successful execution order at a time of his choosing. Being asked, and that's where that video comes back into play, guys. Being tasked with an arbitrary last-minute change was something CIA was accustomed to managing, but it also renewed the concerns some shared over the necessity and legality of the entire operation. The president's secret orders also evoked the CIA's dilemma in the Vietnam War. This history is important in this column, guys. When President Johnson, confronted by growing anti-Vietnam War sentiment, ordered the agency to violate its charter, which specifically barred it. Oh, my God. I'm sorry. This is such a deep state. This is just insane. All right. So the president's secret orders also evoked I'm stuttering here because I'm half pissed and I'm trying not to lose my place so I can make sure that I mark it to look into more of this stuff a little later. All right. So forgive me for that. The president's secret orders also evoked the CIA's dilemma in the Vietnam War days when President Johnson, confronted by growing anti-Vietnam War sentiment, ordered the agency to violate its charter, which specifically barred it from operating inside America by spying on anti-war leaders to determine whether they were being controlled by communist Russia. The agency ultimately acquiesced. Do you see what happened here? God almighty, man. Lyndon B. Johnson, not only did he destroy the black community, he helped create the deep state. The agency ultimately, or emboldened the deep state. The agency ultimately acquiesced, and throughout the 1970s, it became clear just how far it had been willing to go. There were subsequent newspaper revelations in the aftermath of the Watergate scandals about the agency spying on American citizens. Oh my God, that sounds so familiar. Its involvement in the assassination of foreign leaders and its undermining of the socialist government of Salvador Allende. Those revelations led to a dramatic series of hearings in the mid-1970s in the Senate, led by Frank Church of Idaho. You guys have heard of this, the current GOP wanting this Church committee named after him. Frank Church of Idaho, that made it clear that Richard Helms, the agency director, CIA, at the time, accepted that he had an obligation to do what the president wanted, even if it meant violating the law. In unpublished closed-door testimony, Helms ruefully explained that, quote, you almost have an immaculate conception when you do something, close quote. Wow. Under secret orders from a president. Quote, whether it's right that you should have it or wrong that you shall have it, the CIA works under different rules and ground rules than any other part of the government, close quote. That should change. He was essentially telling the senators that he, as head of the CIA, understood that he had been working, listen to this, for the crown and not for the Constitution. The Americans at work in Norway operated under the same dynamic and dutifully began working on the new problem, how to remotely detonate C4 explosives on Biden's order. It was a much more demanding assignment than those in Washington understood. We're bringing this in for a landing here, guys. There was no way for the team in Norway to know when the president might push the button, what it would be in a few weeks, in many months, or in half a year or longer. The C4 attached to the pipelines would be triggered by a sonar buoy dropped by a plane on short notice, but the procedure involved the most advanced signal processing technology. This is where Tom Cruise comes in. Once in place, the delayed timing devices attached to any of the 4 pipelines could be accidentally triggered by the complex mix of ocean background noises. Man, I got to look this stuff up. I'm sorry. By complex mix of background noises throughout the heavily trafficked Baltic Sea, from near and distant ships, underwater drilling, seismic events, waves, and even sea creatures. Do you understand the risk that this dementia patient in the White House was taking? To avoid this, the sonar buoy, once in place, would emit a sequence of unique low-frequency tonal sounds, much like those emitted by a flute or a piano, that would be recognized by the timing device. And after a preset hours of delay, trigger the explosives. You want a signal, this is from the source, you want a signal that is robust enough so that no other signal could accidentally send a pulse that detonated the explosives. I was told by Dr. Theodore Postel, Professor Emeritus of Science, Technology, or this is a quote from the columnist, and National Security Policy at MIT. Postel, who has served as a science advisor to the Pentagon's Chief of Naval Operations, said the issue facing the group in Norway because of Biden's delay was one of chance. Quote, the longer the explosives are in the water, the greater risk there would be of a random signal that would launch the bombs, close quote. What if Russia had been working with China in the Baltic Sea and the explosives just arbitrarily went off? On September 26, 2022, a Norwegian Navy PA surveillance plane made a seemingly routine flight, dropped the sonar buoy. The signal spread underwater, initially to Nord Stream 2 and then on to Nord Stream 1. A few hours later, the high-powered C4 explosives were triggered, and 3 of the 4 pipelines were put out of commission. Within a few minutes, pools of methane gas that remained in the shuttered pipelines could be seen spreading on the water surface, and the world learned that something irreversible had taken place. Here's the fallout. In the immediate aftermath of the pipeline bombing, the American media treated it like it was an unsolved mystery. Russia was repeatedly cited as a likely culprit. Remember, I told you? I talked about this before. Why the hell would Russia destroy their own leverage? Spurred on by calculated leaks from the White House, but without ever establishing a clear motive for such an act of self-sabotage beyond simple retribution. A few months later, when it emerged that Russian authorities had been quietly getting estimates for the cost to repair the pipelines, the New York Times described the news as, quote, complicating theories about who was behind, quote, close quote, the attack. No major American newspaper even dug into the story or dug into the earlier threats to the pipelines that were made by Biden and Undersecretary of State Nuland. Our media is just lazy, and they're making the world dangerous. While it was never clear why Russia would seek to destroy its own lucrative pipeline, a more telling rationale for the president's actions came from Secretary of State Blinken. Asked at a press conference last September about the consequences of the worsening energy crisis in Western Europe, here's what Blinken described the moment as a potentially good one. And I close with this quote. It's a tremendous opportunity to once and for all remove the dependence on Russian energy and thus to take away from Vladimir Putin the weaponization of energy as a means of advancing his imperial designs. That's very significant. And that offers tremendous strategic opportunity for the years to come. But meanwhile, we're determined to do everything we possibly can to make sure the consequences of all this are not borne by citizens in our countries or, for that matter, around the world. More recently, Victoria Nuland expressed satisfaction at the demise of the newest of the pipelines. Testifying at a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing in late January, she told Senator Ted Cruz, like you, quote, like you, I am, and I think the administration is very gratified to know that Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea, close quote. The source had a much more streetwise view of Biden's decision to sabotage more than 1,500 miles of Gazprom pipeline as winter approached. He said, quote, speaking of Biden, I got to admit, the guy has a pair of balls. He said he was going to do it, and he did, close quote. Asked why he thought the Russians failed to respond, he says cynically, quote, maybe they want the capability to do the same things the U.S. did. It was a beautiful cover story, he went on. Behind it was a covert operation that placed experts in the field and equipment that operated on a covert signal. The only flaw, listen to this, great line. The only flaw was the decision to do it. In other words, dumb arse move on Biden's part. Guys, I just completed this report in totality from Seymour Hersh, something I've not done before and probably will never do again, frankly. But I felt like this was so important and absolutely historic. Biden, either through intentionality or incompetence, will get us into World War III if Congress doesn't take back the power of the purse and the power to declare war. Notice someone who was not mentioned much at all, if at all, in this report. Zelensky. Zelensky is just a pawn, guys. You can hate him. You can love him. If this report is true, Zelensky is just a pawn. Remember, in the first days of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, he looked pale. He looked scared. And then they survived for a little while, week or two, and he started figuring out the game. And then he said, okay. If I'm going to fight Biden's proxy war and NATO's proxy war against Russia, this arbitrary war that was completely unfreaking necessary, give up the goods. Give up the goods. Now, do you understand how much closer we are to World War III with this idiot, incompetent boob, evil, demonic, I don't even know what to say, in the White House? I want to say I hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. It's been long, I understand, but I think this is one of the most important stories that you will be hearing perhaps in many of your lifetimes. Seymour Hersh, good job. One could only hope that he's inaccurate, but with this type of detail, I can tell you, I've been in enough court battles to realize when you can come up with some serious detail, oftentimes, where people can go back and track the evidence, it's really hard to prove. It's really hard to disprove, meaning it's likely true. Guys, please subscribe to the podcast wherever podcasts are found: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube. Join us on YouTube, The Carl Jackson Show on YouTube, please. All right, The Carl Jackson Show on YouTube. We would really appreciate that. Also, follow me on all things social media, The Carl Jackson Show on all things social media. I appreciate you guys tuning in today. Until next time, continue to do good. Don't grow weary doing good. but know who's in the White House and know that we're compromised by a deep state and by a CIA that perhaps today follows the crown and not the Constitution. God bless you.